Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So this week we're going to be doing a repair of a Turbografx 16. And for those of you that aren't familiar with this system, it was released like right at the end of the 8-bit console era and the start of the 16-bit console era. And it was extremely popular in Japan, but not really in the United States. And it's really a shame because it has outstanding games, like really cool games. And so if you can get one of these, definitely you should check that out. So let me show you what's wrong with this thing. So when you power on the system, you just get a white screen or a grayish kind of screen. And this is not an issue with the cartridge slot because I inspected the pins, I cleaned the pins, and I used tested working games, and it's just simply not working. And you can see I have the Turbo EverDrive in here, and it's actually quite instructive to have the Turbo EverDrive because it has a status light. So with a normal game, you just plug it in, you get the white screen, you don't know anything. But with this thing, you can see it's trying to initialize, and it's failing. So this is telling me that there's an issue at the chip level. It's just simply not getting past the initial boot, and it's just boot looping from what I can tell. So we're going to go ahead and take this thing apart, see what's wrong with it, and fortunately I have some, resources here which will hopefully allow me to fix this thing. But first, let me take a couple of seconds to thank the sponsor of this video, PCBWay. PCBWay is my go-to option for PCB prototyping, and they also provide PCB assembly, high-quality 3D printing, and even custom CNC machining. And now, PCBWay, in collaboration with Mouser Electronics, is hosting their 4th annual PCB design contest. You can choose to contribute to their IoT, robotics, or free theme categories. There's lots of great prizes, including cash and technology, so check out the link in the description below to learn more about how you can get your project submitted. So thanks again to PCBWay for sponsoring today's video. Alright, so taking apart a Turbografx is actually a somewhat effortful kind of thing. So you've got security bit screws here. These are the same as the Super Nintendo, so as long as you have one of those screwdrivers, you're all set. And then when you open it up, you see that it's encased in this, RF shield prison. And this is not just like screwed down, this is actually soldered into place. So you got to start by just taking the power jack out. And then, I've already gone ahead and removed all of these components, but this is actually soldered into place. So you either got to use a desoldering gun or just a standard soldering iron, and you just heat it up and you pull up the tabs, and you can separate that out. And then the console is held down with 2 screws over here, and that's about it. And there's also 2 screws here that hold the top and bottom shield together. So it's all Phillips screws. It's very simple to take apart. And the bottom works in the same manner. It's also soldered into place, and you have to desolder it in order to fully remove it. You might be tempted to throw out this RF shield, but I would very strongly recommend that you don't, because the bottom half of it especially, it acts as a heat sink. So the 7805 voltage regulator goes here, and it needs a way of cooling down, and so it's attached to the bottom metal, and that's how it passively cools down. So definitely keep this RF shield, and also when you're done doing repairs, make sure you solder it back in and don't just leave it flopping around. Alright, so here's our Turbografx 16, and so you can see it has a couple of proprietary chips. So we've got this one, and this one, the Hue 62, 60, 70, and 80. So the one that I think is the problem is the 6270, because this is kind of like the main CPU over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and replace this with a chip that I found from a donor. So I was very lucky, and I have another PCB right here. So you might be asking yourself, well, why can't you fix this one? What's wrong with it? And I'm not sure if it's showing up on camera, but this one, as you can see right here, is split straight down the middle. There's a huge crack going through the entire PCB. It's cutting like dozens of traces. So sadly, there's really nothing that can be done to fix this PCB. I mean, the amount of bodge work you would need to repair this is just, it's not worth it. There's just too much time involved. But it has good chips. As you can see, I've already removed one from it, and I've used that to fix another system. And so, I always tell people who do this kind of work, if something's broken, don't necessarily throw it out, because you could use this board to fix multiple systems. And these are custom chips. They're not something you can just buy at a store. They're no longer being made. So if you've got a board like this, which used to work, and it's not working because of something obvious like this crack here, then you've got donor chips, donor parts that you can use to save another system. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to take out a surface mount chip like this. And from there, we're going to see if we can swap it in and get this thing working again. Okay, so to remove a chip like this, we're going to use a product that I love called Chip Quick. And what it is basically a low temperature solder that you can use to loosen up all these pins simultaneously. And once everything is all nice and molten, you can just pick up the entire chip in one shot. And I honestly don't know of any other way to do it as fast or as efficiently as with Chip Quick. So you start off with applying this flux. It has this special flux that comes with the kit. And here's the Chip Quick, and you can see that it's like it's very brittle. I can tell you it just breaks off in your hands when you apply it. And the goal here is to just take it and spread it across all the pins. You can see it melts really fast, and it stays molten for a while. So the idea here is that you just basically get all the pins molten simultaneously, and then you just lift it off. Okay. All right, so now that it's applied, I'm going to get my forceps out. And we're going to take the hot air gun and we're going to start working this area. So I have the hot air gun set to about 300 Celsius. And the flow rate is kind of slow. I have it set to number 2, which means the air is not flowing out at a very fast speed. I actually think I might increase it. Yeah, make it 3. You don't want it to go too fast because if there's like surface mount components nearby, the hot air will melt the solder on those surface mount components and it'll send them flying, and you definitely don't want that. So now I'm just going to go back and forth across the entire chip, and you'll see it start to heat up. Okay, so I also went ahead and removed the donor chip from that broken system. And so now, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of solder and Chip Quick and crap all over the pins. So the next thing you've got to do is you've got to use some desoldering braid and some flux, and you can use that along with your iron to remove all of the excess solder from these chips. From these pins. You can do this under a microscope, but I'm going to go ahead and just do it like this so you guys can see more clearly. And yeah, with the separation of the pins on this, it's actually not too bad. It's not as bad as it looks. So you can see I'm adding flux to the chip, adding flux to the wick itself, and then because this stuff is low temperature, it actually melts very easily, and the braid just absorbs it all up. And so you can see this whole side is basically finished. Just going to touch up the legs a little bit. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. All right, so this thing is all set. So now I'm going to go ahead and basically immerse the whole thing in some alcohol just to get all of the flux and all the junk off of the chip and make it nice and clean. And then I'm going to go ahead and inspect it under the microscope just to make sure that everything is looking fine. And as long as it is, we're going to go ahead and proceed with the installation. Okay, so now's the moment of truth. I've checked the pins and I've checked the board. There's no bridges between any of those pads or any of those pins. And so now we're ready to go ahead and solder this thing into place. So the way to do this is to start with the anchor points. You'll see that all of the corners have these anchor points, and you want to start there because you can easily undo it if you've made a mistake, and it's really tough to align this thing on all 4 dimensions. So I usually try to do it with my hand, and it's tough to just verify that. Like, you can usually see 3 out of 4, but the 4th one you just kind of have to hope is in good shape. And that looks about right to me, more or less. There we go. So now at this point, you want to add copious amounts of flux, and you want to start anchoring down these corners. Okay, so you can see that all 4 of the corners are now locked into place, so the chip's not going to move anymore. And just looking visually at all 4 sides, you can see that the pads and the pins are all lined up with each other. So now we're going to go ahead and just do the final step of soldering each one into position. And just like before, we're just going to use a lot of flux rather. And I usually just add a tiny bit of solder to my tip, and I just work it by going up and down like this. You can drag solder as well, but I think that's more of a advanced kind of technique, and and you can bridge things if you're not careful. And as soon as you stop hearing that sizzle of the flux, you know it's time to add more. And I probably will add just a little bit more fresh solder to my iron. Oop, that's too much. There we go. Cleared that out. It's okay if you get bridges. You can always just use flux and maybe a soldering braid to get rid of bridges, so don't be afraid of them. Like, there's one right there. I can see it. Oops. And there we go. Just with a little bit of flux, that bridge is gone. All right, let's keep going. Okay, so it's all soldered into place. I'm just going to go over everything carefully under my microscope and just make sure there aren't any bridges and that all the connections look good. I'm also going to clean this up with some isopropyl alcohol, and then we're going to go ahead and reassemble this thing and test it out. All right, so we've got the Turbografx 16 partially reassembled. So I have the bottom RF shield in place, and I have the voltage regulator attached to it, so that way it'll get cooled. I don't want to overheat that voltage regulator. And it's kind of a weird thing to test a Turbografx 16, because like this is the top half of the shell, so I actually have it flipped upside down, and I have the Turbo EverDrive over here in the Hue card slot, but you can't really see what's going on. I mean, I think I should be able to see the light. It should show up right over here, but it's not ideal. But there's kind of no other way to really do this. So let's go ahead and power it on and see if we've got it working again. All right. Oh, nice. Okay, looks like I got it to work again. So beforehand, as you remember, this light was blinking, but now it went through a full boot, and here we are at the main menu of the Turbo EverDrive. So it looks like that was it. It looks like it was this CPU that was faulty, and putting in that replacement from the donor did the job, and now this thing is working again. So yeah, I kind of think the whole lesson from this video is that it's good to hang on to at least some parts boards, because you never know what you're going to need, and sometimes there's custom chips or chips that are no longer being made that are really hard to find, and they're just sitting on boards that can't be fixed, but they're perfectly good for donors. And so if I tossed that board, there's no way I could have fixed this thing, but now this guy is working again. All right, so that's it for this video. If you like this kind of content, then definitely consider subscribing to the channel. I have videos out like this every Friday. And then, of course, if you guys are interested in getting consoles repaired or modified, you can also reach me directly at oneuprestorations.com. All right, guys, thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.